The first thing that caught me was the way she walked in. I sat in the kitchen and waited. The clock on the wall read 9:12 p.m. Mindy had said she'd be back by 7:30. Just coffee with Dana, she'd told me that morning, brushing her hair in the mirror. You know, the one I told you about. My old client from the salon. She's been so nice, inviting me out. I've been so lonely here, Alex. I'd nodded, trying to ignore the pang of guilt. The move had been hard on her. New city, no job yet, and I was always at work. But still, something about the way she'd been dressing up for these coffee dates lately had started to itch at the back of my mind. When she stepped into the kitchen, I froze. Her blouse, a silky thing she'd bought just last week, was unbuttoned one too many notches, the fabric clinging loosely to her frame. The light from the overhead fixture caught the sheer material, and I could see the faint outline. And nothing else under the blouse. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too rushed. She set her purse down on the counter and avoided my eyes. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "How was coffee?" "Good, good," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. Her lipstick was gone, her lips bare and slightly swollen. There was a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead, and when she leaned over to grab a glass from the cabinet, I caught a whiff of something sharp and sweet, like a cocktail, not coffee. "You're late," I said, more pointedly than I meant to. She hesitated, then laughed, a short, nervous sound. "Yeah, we lost track of time. You know how it is when you're catching up." I did know. Or at least I thought I did. But the way she was standing there, fidgeting with the hem of her blouse, avoiding my gaze, it didn't feel like catching up. It felt like something else. "Dana's really great," she added, as if sensing my silence. "She's been such a good friend. I mean, it's not easy, you know? Being here, alone all day. I'm glad I have someone to talk to." "Yeah," I said slowly. "I'm glad you're making friends." But the words felt hollow. Friends didn't make you come home looking like that. Friends didn't make you smell like a bar at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and turned to leave the kitchen. "I'm gonna go change," she said, already halfway out the door. I watched her go, my mind racing. The way she'd been dressing up lately, the new blouses, the extra time spent on her hair and makeup, it wasn't for me. I hadn't seen her put that much effort into her appearance in weeks. And now this. The unbuttoned blouse, the missing lipstick, the smell of something stronger than coffee. My chest felt tight, like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. Because the truth was, I didn't believe her. And that realization hit me like a punch. The sound of running water from the bathroom snapped me out of my thoughts. Mindy was in the shower, the steady rhythm of the water masking any noise I might make. My heart was pounding as I stood there, staring at her purse on the counter. Her phone was inside. I knew the password. It was the same one she'd used for years, the date of our anniversary. I shouldn't do this. I knew I shouldn't. But the image of her blouse, the smell of that sharp, sweet drink, the way she'd avoided my eyes, it all played on a loop in my mind. I grabbed the phone, my fingers trembling as I typed in the code. The screen lit up, and I went straight to her messages. Scrolling through, I found nothing. No suspicious texts, no flirty exchanges, no red flags. Just a few mundane conversations with her mom, her sister, and a couple of old friends. But then I noticed something odd. There were no messages from Dana. Not a single one. Mindy had mentioned Dana multiple times over the past few weeks. Dana this, Dana that. If they were meeting so often, why weren't there any texts? There were no calls with this name either. In fact, there was no such name in her contact book. I opened the settings, my hands moving quickly. It took me less than a minute to enable message synchronization with laptop. I put the phone back in her purse just as the water shut off. The next evening, I was sitting on the couch, my laptop open in front of me, when the notification popped up. A new message on Mindy's phone. My pulse quickened as I clicked on it. The message was from an unsigned number. Just one line. When will we meet again? I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. There was no name, no context, but the implication was clear. I couldn't see her response. The sync only showed incoming messages, and only until they were read. But it didn't matter. The question alone was enough. I grabbed a pen and scribbled the number down on a scrap of paper. My hands were shaking as I dialed it on my phone. It rang twice before a man's voice answered. Hello. I hesitated, then forced myself to speak. Hi, is Dana there? There was a pause. Who? Dana, I repeated, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I'm looking for Dana. The man laughed, a short, dismissive sound. You've got the wrong number, buddy. No Dana here. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, my mind racing. No Dana. The number wasn't Dana's. So who was it? Later that night, Mindy was scrolling through her phone on the couch while I pretended to read. She suddenly sat up straighter, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed a response. I didn't need to see the message to know what it was about. Dana just texted, she said, her tone casual, as if she hadn't just spent the last 5 minutes engrossed in her phone. She wants to meet for coffee this Friday. Is that okay? I looked at her. She was lying. I didn't know who she was meeting, but it wasn't Dana. I looked at her. She was lying. I didn't know who she was meeting, but it wasn't Dana. Sure, I said, forcing a smile. That's fine. She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks. I've been so lonely lately. It's nice to have someone to talk to. I nodded, my jaw clenched. She turned to walk back into the bedroom, but I stopped her. Mindy, I said, my voice calm but firm. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. Yeah. Can I see the text? Her expression faltered for a split second, just a flicker of hesitation, before she recovered. What text? The one from Dana, I said, keeping my tone light, as if it were no big deal. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh, it's just girl talk. Nothing interesting. Still, I pressed, holding out my hand. Let me see. Her smile wavered. She glanced down at her phone, then back at me. Alex, come on. It's private. Private. I raised an eyebrow. Since when do we keep things private from each other? She hesitated, her grip tightening on her phone. It's not like that. I don't think Dana would appreciate me sharing her messages. Mindy, I said, my voice dropping. Show me the text. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then she let out a sigh, her shoulders slumping. Fine. Here. She handed me the phone, her eyes avoiding mine. I took it, my heart pounding as I opened the messages. But there was nothing there. No text from Dana. No text from anyone. I looked up at her. Where is it? What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The text from Dana, I said, holding up the phone. It's not here. She blinked, then reached for the phone. Oh, I must have deleted it. You know me. I'm always clearing out my inbox. I stared at her, my chest tightening. She was lying. Again. And this time, she wasn't even trying to hide it well. Mindy, I said, my voice low. Who are you really meeting? Her face went pale. Does this number mean anything to you? I asked, my voice calm but cold. She glanced at the paper, then back at me. What are you talking about? I called this number last night, I said, my eyes locked on hers. A man answered. I asked who he was. He said I had the wrong number. But I don't think I do. Her face went pale. Alex, I don't know what you're trying to say. Don't you? I snapped, my patience fraying. Mindy, I'm not stupid. I know you've been lying to me. I know you're not meeting Dana. So who is it? Who are you really seeing? Her hands trembling. I told you, it's Dana. Why are you doing this? Because I don't believe you, I shouted. She flinched, but I didn't care. You come home late, smelling like some fancy drink, your clothes a mess, and you expect me to believe it's just coffee with a friend? Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I'm an idiot? Alex, please, she said, her voice breaking. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mindy, if you don't tell me the truth right now, I'll pack your things myself and throw you out the door. Do you understand me? Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. Not this time. Fine, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's Kyle. The name hit me like a punch. Kyle. Her ex-boyfriend. The one she'd dated all through high school. The one she'd told me about years ago, back when we were first dating. The one she'd said was ancient history. Kyle. I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. As in, your ex Kyle? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I ran into him at the store. He's living here now. He invited me for coffee, and I didn't think it was a big deal. We're just friends, Alex. Nothing happened, I swear. Nothing happened, I said, my voice rising. You expect me to believe that? After the way you came home that night? After all the lies? I'm telling the truth, she cried, her voice desperate. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But I didn't cheat on you, Alex. I wouldn't do that. I stared at her, my chest heaving. The tears, the pleading, it all felt like a performance. A way to manipulate me into backing down. But I wasn't falling for it. You're lying, I said, my voice cold. You've been lying to me for weeks. And now you expect me to believe that nothing happened and it's all innocent. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. Pack your things, I said, my tone final. Her eyes widened. What? You heard me, I said. Pack your things and get out. You can go live with Kyle, or you can go back to your hometown. I don't care. But you're not staying here. Alex, please, she begged, reaching for me. Don't do this. We can work it out. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. There's nothing to work out. You made your choice, Mindy. Now live with it. She stared at me, her face a mask of shock and despair. For a moment, I thought she might argue, might try to convince me to change my mind. But then her shoulders slumped, and she nodded. Okay, she whispered, her voice hollow. I'll go. My chest ached, but I didn't let myself feel it. Not yet. This wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. But for now, it was enough. The sound of zippers and shuffling filled the house as Mindy packed her things. I stood in the living room, arms crossed, watching her move from room to room. She didn't look at me, didn't speak, just methodically filled suitcases with clothes, shoes, and the small trinkets she'd collected over the years. It was surreal, watching the life we'd built together being dismantled piece by piece. When she finally wheeled her suitcase to the front door, she paused, her hand on the knob. For a moment, I thought she might turn around, might say something, anything, to make this feel less final. But instead, she asked a question that caught me off guard. How did you know about Kyle? Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant, like she was afraid of the answer. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. It doesn't matter, I said, my tone flat. You're leaving. That's all that matters now. She turned to face me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Alex, I need to know. How did you find out? I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You really don't get it, do you? It's not about how I found out. It's about what you did. The lies, the secrets, the way you looked me in the eye and told me it was nothing. That's what matters. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. Just go, Mindy, I said, my voice cracking. I don't care where you go or what you do. Just get out. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, her shoulders slumping. Without another word, she opened the door and stepped outside, pulling her suitcase behind her. The door clicked shut, and just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the closed door, my mind racing. Anger, sadness, self-doubt, it all swirled together in a chaotic storm I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything to release the pressure building inside me. But instead I just stood there, frozen. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I walked through the house, room by room, taking in the emptiness. Her side of the closet was bare, her makeup table cleared off, the photos of us together gone from the walls. It was like she'd never been here at all. I ended up in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty coffee pot she'd made that morning. My hands shook as I poured myself a cup, but I didn't drink it. I just stood there, staring at the steam rising from the mug, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship. The good times, our first date, the day we moved in together, the way she'd laughed when I proposed. And the bad times, the fights, the silences, the growing distance between us. I'd thought we could get through anything. I'd thought we were stronger than this. But I was wrong. I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. The weight of what had happened pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. I felt empty, like someone had reached inside me and ripped out everything that mattered. I thought about calling someone, a friend, a family member, anyone who might understand. But the truth was, I didn't have anyone. Not here. When we'd moved to this city for my job, I'd left everyone behind. My friends, my family, my support system. They were all hours away. And now, I was completely alone. The thought made me laugh, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the empty house. Alone. In a strange city, in a house that no longer felt like home, with nothing but my thoughts for company. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But as I sat there, staring at the cold coffee in my hands, something shifted. A small, quiet realization that cut through the chaos. This wasn't the end. Not for me. It would take time, weeks, months, maybe even years, to heal from this. To rebuild my life, to trust again, to feel like myself. But I would. I had to. I stood up, dumping the coffee in the sink and rinsing the mug. The simple act felt like a step forward, no matter how small. But as I turned off the kitchen light and walked back to the living room, the anxiety lingered. The emotional scars were still there, raw and painful, and I knew they wouldn't fade overnight. This was just the beginning. The days after Mindy left were a blur. I transferred all the funds from our joint account to my personal account. It wasn't out of spite. Well, not entirely. It was about reclaiming control, about protecting myself. She called me, her voice sharp and angry. "Alex, what the hell?" she snapped. "You left me with nothing." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the city lights. "You'll figure it out," I said, my tone calm. "Figure it out," she repeated, incredulous. "How am I supposed to do that?" "Ask Kyle," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "He seems to be good at taking care of you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Alex, please. Don't do this." "It's already done," I said. "Goodbye, Mindy." I hung up before she could respond. The call left me shaken, but also resolved. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into backing down. This was my life now, and I was going to live it on my terms. I threw myself into work, burying myself in spreadsheets, meetings, and deadlines. It was easier to focus on numbers than on the hollow ache in my chest. The office became my sanctuary, a place where I could pretend everything was normal, even if just for a few hours. But the nights were harder. I'd come home to an empty house, the silence pressing in on me like a weight. At first, I tried to fill the void with noise, TV shows I didn't care about, podcasts I barely listened to, music that only made me feel more alone. But eventually, I stopped fighting it. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in years. I picked up novels I'd always meant to read, losing myself in other worlds, other lives. It didn't fix anything, but it helped. On weekends, I forced myself to leave the house. I explored the city I'd moved to for work but never really gotten to know. I walked through parks, visited museums, tried new restaurants. At first, it felt strange, almost wrong to be doing these things alone. But as the weeks passed, I started to enjoy it. I liked the freedom of going where I wanted, when I wanted, without having to consider anyone else. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the anger and sadness threatened to overwhelm me. Nights when I lay awake, replaying every argument, every lie, every moment of betrayal. But slowly, I began to see things differently. One evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, I came across a photo of Mindy and me from our wedding day. We looked so happy, so sure of each other. For a moment, I felt a pang of regret, a longing for what we'd lost. But then I realized something. That version of us was gone. It had been gone for a long time, maybe even before the affair. I deleted the photo. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Filing for divorce wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I needed to close this chapter of my life, to move on. The lawyer walked me through the process, and I listened carefully, taking notes. When we hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into rebuilding. I redecorated the house, getting rid of the things that reminded me of her and replacing them with pieces that felt like me. I joined a gym, started cooking meals from scratch, even signed up for a photography class. It was strange, rediscovering who I was outside of a relationship, but it was also liberating. One Saturday, I was walking through the park, camera in hand, when it hit me, this was my fresh start. The affair had been painful, devastating even, but it had also given me the chance to start over. To rebuild my life, not as half of a couple, but as my own person. I stopped walking, looking out over the lake. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning.